Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are tackling a high-stakes balancing act that every single business faces: capacity planning. I mean, from your local coffee shop to a giant car manufacturer, they all have to master this. You get it right, you win. Get it wrong, well, you could be out of business. It's really all about getting what you can do to perfectly match what your customers want you to do.
So let's get right into it. What's the core problem here? Well, just think of it like you're walking a tightrope. If you lean too far one way or too far the other, you're headed for a very long fall.
So on one side of that tightrope, you've got undercapacity. You just can't keep up with demand. That means you're literally turning away sales, your customers are getting angry, and your reputation takes a serious hit. But on the other side, you've got overcapacity. You've poured a ton of money into buildings and equipment and staff that are just sitting there. You're just burning cash and absolutely killing your profits. And this is exactly why getting that balance right is so important. This isn't just some operational detail. It's a massive strategic choice. Your decisions about capacity pretty much reveal your entire game plan for the future, and maybe more importantly, exactly how much risk you're willing to stomach to get there. Okay, so before we can figure out how to plan for it, we've got to ask, what is capacity really? It sounds kind of abstract, but it's actually something you can put your finger on.
So, in plain English, it's just the absolute maximum amount of work a business can handle in a certain amount of time. Think of it like the top speed of your company's engine, you know? Whether you're making cars, treating patients, or processing loans, there's always a limit.
Okay, but here's where it gets really interesting. How you measure that top speed totally changes depending on what business you're in. It is definitely not a one-size-fits-all kind of number.
I mean, check this out. For a textile mill, capacity is pretty straightforward. It's meters of cloth per day. But for a hospital, they think in terms of bed days per month. A bank branch might even break it down to man-hours per week. The key takeaway here is that the unit you use to measure has to perfectly match what your business actually does. So, how do these huge organizations make these incredibly important decisions? Well, it's not like they're just guessing. There's a very structured process, a real roadmap they follow to plan for the future. It all kicks off with a really deep look into the future, trying to predict what customers are going to want. From there, you brainstorm different ways to meet that potential demand. Then you analyze the heck out of each option. What are the costs? What are the risks? And finally, you have to pick a path and make it happen. And what's so cool about this process is that it's a mix of art and science, right? It's quantitative and qualitative. On one hand, you're running the hard numbers, calculating the ROI on a massive investment. But at the same time, you have to use your judgment to weigh these risks you can't really put a number on. Like, what happens to our brand if we can't keep up? Now we come to what is, without a doubt, the single hardest part of this whole puzzle: trying to accurately predict the future. This is really where the cold, hard science of data has to meet the art of making a good guess. Forecasters have a whole bunch of tools in their toolkit. For something stable and predictable, like cement, they can use what's called regression analysis. It's basically looking at past data to find links, like demand for cement goes up when new home construction goes up. Simple enough. But what if you're launching a brand new iPhone? There's no past data. That's when you might use something called the Delphi method. You get a panel of experts to anonymously share their forecasts, you refine them over a few rounds, and eventually you land on a consensus. You're tapping into collective wisdom instead of history. So, you've got your forecast. Now what? Now you're staring down a huge choice. How exactly are you going to grow? It's not just if you're going to grow, it's all about the how. And it really all comes down to this one central strategic question. Do you make one gigantic, bold bet on the future and build a massive new facility all at once? Or do you take smaller, more careful steps, adding a little bit of capacity here and there as you go? A huge factor that drives this decision is an idea you've probably heard of: economies of scale. The basic idea is that building bigger can actually make each individual thing you produce cheaper in the long run. Why? Well, a giant factory can support way more automation and super advanced technology, which drives down the cost for every single unit that rolls off the line, even if that first investment was enormous. And you gotta remember, building a whole new factory isn't the only move on the chessboard. Companies can get a quick, temporary boost. You can ask employees to work overtime, you can add extra shifts, you can even outsource some of the work to other companies. These are absolutely crucial tools for handling those short-term spikes in demand without a massive long-term commitment. So when you boil it all down, the planning, the forecasting, the number crunching, It all comes down to one final strategic bet. Do you risk having too much, or do you risk having too little?
So when would it ever make sense to risk having too much stuff? Well, you might bet big if you know that building a new factory is going to take years. Or maybe subcontracting just isn't an option in your industry. For some brands, losing even one customer to a competitor is so painful that it's just safer to have a little extra capacity than not quite enough.
But then, of course, there's the other side of that coin. You might be willing to risk having too little capacity if you've got other options, right? If you can easily call up a partner to handle your overflow work, or if adding a new production line is pretty quick and cheap, there's way less risk. And if your customers are loyal and they're willing to wait a bit, it just makes more sense to build more conservatively. And that really gets to the heart of it. There is no single right answer here. There's no magic formula. The right call depends entirely on a company's unique situation, its industry, its competitors, its technology, and what it's trying to achieve in the long run. Which leaves us with a final thought to chew on. In today's world, a world that moves so fast, where technology and markets can change in the blink of an eye, where does the greater risk really lie? Is it in building for a future that might not show up? Or is it in not being ready for a future that does?